I'll give an example. I was writing up on the whiteboard out there, and I was saying, "End the Federal Reserve?" question mark. And there are some folks sitting on the table right next to us, and they're like, "What practical importance does that have towards anything?" What they said, Sean, it was, "Why talk about something arbitrary like that?" Right? And it's like, I don't know. Like, I would rather not talk about the war either, because it's pretty arbitrary, right? So hopefully we're working on creating a culture that not only appreciates discussions like these, but can do so in a productive, or if nothing else, not malicious manner. So today we're talking about ending the Federal Reserve and what sort of role that plays in history in America, or the future of the world. I guess that's about it. Two things. Email list, sign up if you're not already on it. Also, there are evaluation forms of this topic, of whether on a lecture possibly you would like to present yourself, what was done well with this lecture, or what was done terribly and would never come again if it was not changed. And I guess that's about it. With that started, we've got Nick Landeros for today, and we have to be out of here at 4, so set your watches. That's about it.
All right. Well, I brought a few props along to help demonstrate some of this stuff. So today we're talking on whether or not we should end the Fed. And before we begin, if you have any paper currency whatsoever in your wallets, purses, whatever, go ahead and take that out at some point and take a look at the very top of the bill. You'll notice that no matter what denomination it is, every single one of them says Federal Reserve note on there. And the reason for that is because the owners of those bills have put their name on every single piece of paper that's in circulation. So I wanted to start off with a couple definitions, and the first of which is fiat money, which is what we have in this country. That is money which has no intrinsic value and cannot be redeemed for specie, which is gold or silver, or commodity, but is made legal tender by government decree. All modern paper currencies and most coin currencies are fiat money, the value of which depends on the strength of the issuing nation's economy. Issuance of too much fiat money leads to inflation. We've got inflation up on the board, and we often hear that it's just an increase in prices. That's absolutely not true. Inflation really is an increase in the volume of the money in circulation. That results in the devaluation of the dollar, and that alone creates the rise in prices. So if we want to picture that, money supply is written on here, and it gets fainter and fainter because your dollar gets to be less and less. So the opposite of, with inflation also, spending is generally up, and that's generally on the part of the government, not particularly in the private sector, because people lose the ability to start paying for stuff when prices go up. And unemployment can go either way. It can go down because things are costing a bit more, and some companies can make profit if they can get to it before the currency is devalued. Or it can go up because they can't afford to pay for the goods and the employees. So they have to let one go, and they're not going to let go of their goods. So the opposite of inflation is deflation, and that's a contraction of the money supply or the availability of credit. But in some rare instances, the amount of money stays the same, and the goods go up. And so that is actually a good form of deflation. That's the only form of deflation that you'd actually want to have. Another way that it can be caused is by a decrease in consumer, government, or investment spending, and that often leads to decreased demand, which of course then leads to higher unemployment. And the final definition that I want to do is bubble, and that is the rapid rise of equity prices in a given sector that is unfounded and not market-based. And it's used because, like a bubble, the prices will get to a point where they do that, and they collapse violently. Nobody wants that. So today we're talking about the Federal Reserve System, so let's explain what that is first. It's an autonomous and private banking corporation, and it lends money to various institutions and governments, but the primary government is the United States. And it does this with interest. It also has full and highly undisclosed control over the monetary policy of the United States. Contrary to popular belief, it is not federal, nor is anything actually reserved there. In much the same way that GMC, Buick, Chevy, Cadillac are all part of General Motors Corp., the Federal Reserve is just the American branch of the central banking system that is ran cooperatively by the World Bank, by the owners of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, or IMF. I'm going to refer to that, so I'll just cut it down to IMF. So let's go back and take a look at some history here. We all heard that growing up that the primary reason for the Revolutionary War was no taxation without representation. But Ben Franklin had this to say about that. The colonies would gladly have borne the little tax on tea and other matters had it not been that England took away from the colonies their money, which created unemployment and dissatisfaction. The inability of the colonists to get power to issue their own money permanently out of the hands of George III and the international bankers was the prime reason for the Revolutionary War. So let's take a look at history of central banking within this country. The first was the Bank of North America, and that one was modeled after the Bank of England, the one that was the prime reason for the Revolutionary War, as Franklin put it. And that was during the Articles of Confederation, so it was before the current government that we have in place was established. So a lot of states didn't like this idea. They took issue with it. Pennsylvania even cut off their charter early and banished the the Bank of North America from its borders. So there was a lot of problems with that whole thing, and eventually the Articles of Confederation got replaced with the Constitution. If you know your history, you already knew that. But in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8 states, Congress alone has the power to coin money and regulate the value thereof. And in conjunction with that is Article 1, Section 10, which forbids the states from making anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts. If you read that along with the 10th Amendment, Congress is not given the power to delegate the task of creating money, and nor are the states allowed to actually use paper money, which is what we're doing now. Mayor Amschel Rothschild, if you know that name, it's generally not accompanied with good feelings, said, "Let me issue and control a nation's money, and I care not who makes its laws." So 2 years after the Constitution went into effect, Hamilton was pushing for the first bank of the United States, and it was created with a 20-year charter. It was not renewed in 1811, and 5 months later, the U.S. found itself in the War of 1812. So they were racking up debt during this time. The thing that was suggested to offset that debt and help pay for the war was the creation of the Second Bank of the United States in 1816. And that one also had a 20-year charter. Andrew Jackson was sworn in on March 4th, 1829, and he was not at all fond of the banks. At a conference of bankers, he actually told all of them, "You are a den of vipers and thieves. I intend to rout you out, and by the eternal God, I will rout you out." In 1832, he vetoed the bill to renew the Second Bank's charter, so he was able to successfully kill it, and in 1836 it expired, and the bank disappeared. Beginning in early 1833, he started withdrawing funds, and that's what helped push the bank out of business really quickly. He listed some things for why he vetoed it. And he said that it causes the government to be under the control of foreign interests. It served to make the rich richer by moving wealth from the poor and middle class upwards. It had too much control over members of the government, and it concentrated the nation's financial strength into one institution, thereby favoring the northern states and treating the western and southern states unfairly.